So Dabo Swinney and Clemson just went out and did what 95% of Miami Hurricanes fans wanted Mario Cristobal to do. Do we have the right to be a little frustrated here?
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, your host. I'm a University of Miami alumnus, longtime South Florida sports radio vet, and contributor to allhurricanes.com. And thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts and available free on YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. So the Clemson Tigers, they just went 11-3 this season. They win the ACC, and yet they just made an offensive coordinator change. Dabo goes out and steals Garrett Riley from TCU, the Broyles Award winner. We do have one of those, to be fair. We do have a Broyles winner. But then Dabo goes out and gets the hottest name in coordinating, Garrett Riley. Meanwhile, Miami fans frustrated after going 5-7. With an offense that scored 19 points per game last year, yet Mario Cristobal is standing pat, at least for now, with the current coordinator. That's why Miami fans are frustrated. You know what I do when I'm frustrated? I go out and I seek the type of therapy that only Larry Blustein can provide. Our boy Blue, South Florida high school sports guru, 560 WQAM and the Six Ring Cane. So Blue, Clemson right now, they're living the fantasy of almost every Miami fan going out and snatching Garrett Riley. Do Miami fans have the right to feel frustrated right now that, you know, an offense that scored 19 points per game last year, no coaching changes have been made?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, there's a couple of schools of thought. A lot of people are, no matter who you talk to, and I try to get to the sources. I mean, I'm not really good at listening to people who say, hey, I have a friend of a friend who knows this guy, who knows that guy. And
I hear from a lot of those people, by the way. I hear from a lot of friends of friends.
And I'd much rather go head on with it. And, and the one thing that I've been told is that, they're kind of right now, they're going to stand pat because there's a couple of recruits that pretty much hinge on, what this hire is all about and keeping, Coach Gattis in place. So he may change his mind after the second national signing day. But for right now, I mean, to me, it would make more sense like with Clemson did and some of the other schools is you pull the plug now, if you're going to do it. But since they're not doing it, I just think as time goes on, and the change isn't made, the likelihood of it being made, I don't think is going to be that great. And I think that what happens outside the program is a lot of people get frustrated, but they don't understand the inner workings and they don't understand how things go. And, they just see, what's black and white. And it's not always like that. And there's a lot of relationships built. You don't know, in meetings, and we don't know all the things that go on that, Mario understands that the roster was horrible, and then you think to yourself, well, you know what, he's going to give the guy or anybody on the staff that a lot of people think that maybe should be gone, maybe give him another chance. Or, he doesn't probably even look at it like they failed. He just looks at it that they did the best with what they had. And I know that's hard for people to understand, but when you're inherited a roster that's average at best, are you going to blame the offensive coordinator or anybody else? What if they got as much out of these people as possible? And that's what I think he believes. And for right now, and I think that, that's the philosophy that he goes on. He, you know, if you know Mario Cristobal, you have to understand the one thing is he don't care what you or I think. He doesn't care
That's a
because
great
that's not
point.
the
He
deal.
doesn't care how angry we tweet. He's not going to make a move
He
to appease the
doesn't, you
fans.
know what? You know, all these fans and all these, I know this guy who's a big booster and he says this, he doesn't care about that.
Yeah.
He knows his job is secure. You know, he came in to do a job, and you know what? It's not like, you know, a lot of other programs where you walk in and then the cupboard's kind of full. His cupboard was really empty. I mean, his offensive line was horrible. You know, you had no real playmakers. Your running game evaporated with injury. You know, I mean, your quarterback really never had anybody to throw to, you know, other than, you know, you have Restrepo who's out for 5 games. And so everything hinges, you know. I mean, I think when they do evaluations, they go, well, we didn't do this or we didn't do that, but there's got to be a reason why we didn't do that.
Well,
And
but
why
another
were you
thing,
so
like,
successful at Michigan, you
right,
know, and
right.
all this stuff. So, you know what? You don't throw away marquee people just because they didn't fill the fans' expectations. And like I said, this all could change. It all could change next week. But the likelihood of it changing now, I mean, because they could have gone after Garrett or any of these guys too. But I think that they feel right now that they have somebody, you know, that they believe in. And, you know, it's just things didn't work out. And you know what? If Miami scores 40 points a game next year, and I mean, they'll be sucking up the Gattis like, oh, I told you we should have kept them, and
Royals
you know,
winner.
so you know how that is. I mean, everybody's you know,
Yeah.
I mean, a second guesser and all this stuff because no matter who it's been, whether it's Randy or Al Golden or Manny Diaz or Mark Richt, everyone's going, oh, they're going to, the day they got the job, I knew they should have gotten the job. This is great. But then all of a sudden things evaporate and then everybody turns sour. But that's what fans are all about. But
Now, I respect.
I'll never tell a fan not to think one way or another, Alex.
Well, I respect like something you said about recruiting, and there's more to that than meets the eye when it comes to offensive recruits. But as far as what I can see, like, and I'm not on the staff, right? So I'm not, you know, I'm not privy to the inner workings. But as far as what I can see, Blue, I see a problem with wide receiver recruiting. Like I see the guys that they missed on in the class of 2023, the guys that they've missed on so far in the transfer portal. And so, you know, on the outside looking in, how do I not hold the wide receivers coach, who's the same guy as the offensive coordinator, Josh Gattis? How do I not hold him accountable for that? And I know how Mario is obsessed with recruiting.
Yeah. Well, no, you got to, and you have a valid point. I mean, I do, but I think that maybe there's something in the workings right now from a transfer portal. I know they have a couple of visitors coming in, guys that, you know, that can understand. I mean, that if they walk into this situation, they're all already, you know, in the mix. Right. And, you know, I think that they believe in Colby Young. I think that they believe he could be that guy, you know, given an opportunity where you have a solid run game and a healthy Restrepo and playmakers like Joseph in Washington and other guys like that and Brashard Smith. I think that, you know, everybody, you know, you look back and the only thing I could look back is HB Blades when he came out of high school and he went to Pitt. And then when he came back, and everybody goes, well, he'll never play in the NFL. I said, well, you got to understand the type of player is he plays off of teammates. You see, he's not an individual guy. So when, you know, you'd be surprised how well these receivers play when there's other options and, you know, people aren't dropping balls. And to me, I think what you're going to see more is an emphasis on the tight ends. And Miami's going to become more like Iowa. Really, I think, because when you think about it, Iowa has these marquee guys oftentimes going in the first round, and that's what Miami has right now. Their tight end room over the next 2 years is going to be insane. And so I think the pieces are coming together. I just don't think anybody understands how horrible this roster was. It was a terrible roster.
Yeah. No, that's all very fair. We're joined here by Larry Blustein, an absolute legend covering recruiting, covering high school football, college football, Larry is he's a staple here in the South Florida community. He did mention transfer portal visitors. Miami's got a couple of important ones coming in this week. They've got a wide receiver coming in. They've got a tight end coming in. We will talk about that and more right here on Locked On Canes, right after we talk about the awesome folks at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Guys, I'm on the site every day because I'm arming myself at BetOnline. I am arming myself with the analytics and the analysis I need to beat the books, okay? Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season, basketball, hockey. We've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can get those as well at BetOnline. We are always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. By the way, make sure you make Locked On College Basketball with Andy Patton and Isaac Shade your second listen. Those guys are crushing it. But I'm here on Locked On Canes with Larry Blustein. So, Blue, let's start with wide receiver. Miami has missed on some targets even this week, like seeing Dante Thornton go to Tennessee. Miami was targeting Andrell Anthony from Michigan. He took his talents elsewhere, but the Hurricanes have a playmaker visiting this week. He's not tall, but he can play on the outside. He is an absolute burner. He's also a great punt and kick returner. Gary Bryant Jr. out of USC. Now, Blue knows a thing or two about USC, so I'm sure you've watched Gary Bryant probably closer than most. He's visiting. He's going to be in South Florida today. He's visiting Miami today, Friday, through the weekend. If Miami can lock up Gary Bryant, he's only about 5'11", but he can play on the outside, and I think he would compete to start, if not start, right away at the University of Miami. What can you tell us about Gary Bryant, and do you like Miami's chances here?
First of all, he reminds me of Steve Smith. And here's a guy who played in the NFL. It wasn't real big, but he could spread, he could get outside. He could cause some havoc. He's quick off the ball, can get open. Definitely a playmaker. Obviously at USC, they brought in a ton of kids, that could play that position. And certainly, you look back at a couple of years ago when Miami went to Oklahoma for a receiver that coming out of high school was one of the best in the nation, top 3 or 4 receiver in the country. And sometimes you get in a logjam, and sometimes you may not, be a part of what's going on. It doesn't mean you're necessarily not good. It's just that, there's different fits. And yeah, I think Miami's got a legit chance, because remember this, he's going to walk into a situation where he comes in and he's going to be the dude. And everybody wants to hear that, when you walk in. Some places he may get in the mix. Like, I had heard about a couple of other schools that are in, the Texas and a few other schools that are in the mix for him. And he may not be the marquee guy, but Miami can promise him, listen, you'll be given every opportunity possible to make a difference. You could be the next Rambo. You could be the next guy who, who's, a lot of people knew coming out of high school that was just a stud. And he was, I watched him and I followed him. And when SC got him, and you say to yourself, wow, that's why they're becoming a better program. And, but I think that the good visit this weekend, I think Mario, does his charm, and you get all the offensive people in there and say, listen, introduce them to a couple of dudes that are already on campus, and, tell them, listen, this is what we got. We have marquee offensive linemen coming. We have slot kids, out the butt. Tremendous kids coming in. And then, Kobe who had a really good year last year. So he said there's going to be a lot of competition. And I think this would be a great place for you, especially the fact that you're going to get a lot of exposure, a lot of, we play a schedule that a lot of people are going to, see not only in the ACC, but with Texas A&M. So yeah, no, it's a great selling point. And if anybody, I don't have to tell Mario Cristobal, what to say. That man could close ice in Alaska. So
I love it. And he's not the only marquee visitor. So Gary Bryant Jr., wide receiver out of USC, is visiting. The Hurricanes also have a tight end who Mario Cristobal is very familiar with. This guy's almost as old as Mario Cristobal. I don't know. Was he recruited by Chip Kelly back in the day? So Oregon tight end Cam McCormick is going to be visiting this weekend. He is entering his 8th year of eligibility. I didn't even know that was possible, but I guess he had, a regular red shirt, injury red shirt, the free COVID year. So he's entering his 8th and final year of eligibility. This guy's probably a PhD in like 2 different majors at this point. Cam McCormick. But here's the thing. And I know people are like, oh, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about a 26-year-old tight end. Guys, what Blue was talking about earlier about how Miami wants to really be a powerful team up front, run the football, be physical. So Cam McCormick, he is a blocking specialist, a blocking tight end. He's one of the best blocking tight ends in the country, and he's a grown man at 26 years old. If you bring in a guy like this, Blue, he could make an immediate impact, and he's also coming in for a visit this week.
Yeah, well, 100%. I think he and Stetson Bennett went to kindergarten together. So, but when you take a look at what he brings to the table, and you are 100% right. I mean, this is a guy that comes in. He's a mature guy, as somebody who's gone through those freshman and sophomore and junior, growing pains. He's a guy that obviously is going to have multiple degrees. So he's going to be somebody that a lot of the kids are going to gravitate to, and they're going to look at him being the old man, but yet he's a guy that could really be an asset to this team. His game reminds me a lot of Durham Smythe from the Miami Dolphins, and the fact that this is a kid that learned at Notre Dame, how to be a classic blocker. He was an asset as far as what he could catch the ball, but he was more used as an additional lineman. And I think that's what he brings to the table, because you have pass catchers on Miami that are tight ends already. So, I mean, you need to have this. If you run that type of offense that Miami runs, you need to have that additional blocking, especially when you're building an offensive line. Yeah, he would be an absolute gem to have, in this program. And his knowledge of Mario and his knowledge of just the way things run. I mean, here's a guy that is a plug and play type of kid. It's not like he's going to go and have to learn a new system and a lot of people. And he and Marable close, I'm sure, because Marable working with the lineman at Oregon also used him as a blocking lineman. So he's a dude, I mean, and like I said, the best thing about it is he comes in, to a lot like Lou Hedley. Lou Hedley was one of those guys when he came here, mature guy, been through a lot of this stuff before, he's matured. He's no more a little teenager. The guy, obviously, from an experience standpoint, and the kids will probably look up to a guy like that more so than a coach, because they're in his age group, so to speak. And also he's playing the same ball as they are.
Yeah, no, that's very, very well said here by Larry Blustein. And so another thing on Miami's tight ends, you talk about Miami having certainly a good group of tight ends. A lot of these guys can catch. One guy, what do you think we might see from Jaleel Skinner coming into his second year? Do you think this is a guy who could get even lined up wide a lot, because he's really speedy for a tight end and he's got that sort of height that creates mismatches?
Yeah, most definitely, because, with Arroyo and with some of the other kids that are coming in this class, and certainly pretty good football players on hand. And I think Jaleel would be one of those guys that if you put him out wide, as like you said, he's a big body, but he's not a thick body. And this is a guy that can create mismatches because, like you said, he has speed and he's got tight end instinct. So, yeah, he would. I'll tell you this. That's going to be a guy that could be the trump card, so to speak, in spring, because they're going to use him a lot in that position because they can afford to, because they've got just an amazing amount of tight ends that are ready to to come in and make an impact. And I think Jaleel, who is not the 260 pounders and the 250s, I think he becomes an asset at that position. And that's a good call. I think that he's going to be one of those guys during the spring that's going to get got a lot of looks outside, and also maybe even, put him in the slot sometimes, because that'll really cause a lot of havoc having a guy that big.
Yeah, no, that's well said. Larry Blustein is with us. When we come back, I do want to get the latest on Cormani McClain, because something is going on today, and I will explain what that is when we come back. Plus, a former 5-star recruit from Georgia has hit the transfer portal, and there is a Miami connection with him. So, guys, we still have a lot coming up here on Locked On Canes. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen today. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts, and available free on YouTube. So, Blue, it's been very quiet on the Cormani McClain front here really since the Under Armour game. Now, there is, I would consider this a hopeful update from a Miami standpoint. Gabby Urrutia from Inside the U has reported that, now that the dead period is lifting, Miami is sending a contingent of coaches to Lakeland High School today, to go check on Cormani. Kevin Steele, Charlie Strong, and Jamil Adai will be among those representing Miami today. Have you heard any buzz, Blue, on your end from Cormani? Because ever since everyone was talking about him at the Under Armour game with that awkward interview that he gave, it's been very quiet ever since.
Yeah, well, to me, when I see quotes and about him, I pass him over, because he's not talking to anybody, and especially about recruiting. So when people say, and I love Gabby, he's a good guy, and I understand it, but anything that he's going to say, it has to be hearsay, because I know the people close to Cormani, and nobody's really saying anything, and he's not saying anything. And he said, the last I heard is, he said, we'll see things explode a little bit on the 15th. Well, that's 2 days away. Yeah. That'll be on a Sunday. So if that's when he set the deadline, because, Miami going there today is great. I just think it's Miami. If he's throwing up a smoke screen, it's a pretty good one, but he doesn't say a lot. So it's really not I heard Alabama, I heard Colorado, and I think in this day and age, it's going to come down to money, like Jaden Rashada.
What a story.
It's a shame we're living in that type of society, but this is the crazy part of it. And this is why when they came out with the NIL at the beginning, I said the NCAA needs to get involved in this, because if they don't, it's going to get out of hand, because you have two entities. You have the college, who can't say anything, and the NIL is a separate deal. So you see, that's what I'm saying. So if that's what's going on, it's a bidding war, and there's money, and which I'm sure it is involved. I mean, it's not going to come down to the best football program. It's not going to come down to the best coaches. It's going to come down to how much money you can put in a bank account, because you certainly got to feel that a guy like Rashada could have flourished at Florida in the SEC.
Could have flourished at Miami too.
Yeah, well, Miami too, exactly. But I'm just saying. But his latest gig with Florida, you figured, okay, so he's there, but it's not a football decision, and there's nothing that a Napier or a Mario Cristobal or a Norvell or anybody could do about it, because you have no control over this NIL. There's none. There's nobody can comment on it. You go to the AD at Miami or what, they can't comment on it. They can't do anything about it, because it's not. And that's why I said from the beginning, the only way this thing could ever work. And remember, wasn't this just the beginning said, we've got to put a few dollars in these athletes' pockets, Well, a few dollars isn't 13 million, and that's where I say, this thing has gotten so far out of hand, and the NCAA, they got nothing to do with it. Well, it's they're the governing body of this entire deal. This is not like it's turned into NFL. Before you know it, we're going to have we're going to have salary caps at the college level.
That may be what they have to do. Like, I don't know how else you would regulate it other than kind of a cap.
You have to regulate it, because if it doesn't, and you know what, I'm all for the kids getting paid. Really, because that's one thing we've been striving for decades, but it got way out of hand really quick. It's not just these kids, getting a stipend. Like, actually, Miami got the ball rolling by saying, I think it was with the top gun or our top team, the top
American
team
top
up in,
team. Yeah.
and they all got like what, 500 a month or whatever. Okay, to me, that's assisting in a college. They just want these kids to be able to, have some pocket money and go out to dinner and, enjoy themselves and have a few dollars and say, well, no, I got to stay home. That's what I thought it was intended for at the beginning, just to give these kids a little bit of a cushion, now a cushion. And you look you look at the Cavender twins. I mean, they've got a lot more than a cushion. And, that's why I'm saying everything that they have, from their car to their apartment, to their clothes, to everything, is sponsored. And, and that's what's happening. There's no more amateur in college athletics.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right about that. Last thing I wanted to get your take on, last person I wanted to get your take on. Now, Miami would have a lot of competition for this player. I hear a lot from Florida fans and Florida State fans wanting Georgia cornerback Jaheim Singletary. This guy, he covers you like a blanket. He's a former 5-star recruit. I don't know why he's decided to leave Georgia, but he is maybe the best player in the portal. Like this is a solid player, former 5-star recruit. Now there is a Miami connection, because Jamil Adai, Miami's defensive backs coach, was his primary recruiter to Georgia, Blue. So do you think there could be any smoke there? And I'm not going to ask you if Miami could use a player like this, because any team in the country could. But, I mean, how could he fit in at Miami?
He was my number one player coming out of high school in Jacksonville. And I'll tell you what, the kid was a beast. And I watched him, and you know what? He considered Miami early on. I remember that, there was a lot of the guys talking about him coming down, to play down here. And he says, you know what? I love it down there, but right now I'm going to go. I still remember, because when I saw him as a sophomore, and I said, wow, this kid's going to be special. And then I kept following him, and I said, you know what? He's as good. It's like Brandon Innes. A lot of people look at a guy like that and they kind of take him for granted because he started since the 8th grade. I mean, you just don't come across athletes like that. And Jaheim is the same way. I mean, tremendous secondary kid, leaders, got everything. He's got speed. He's got athletic ability. And that's why he went to Georgia. But I definitely think Miami could be in play here, because of the fact that he was interested in them at the beginning. You go back and look at, his choices coming out of high school, and Miami was right there. And that was a Miami team that had very little to talk about for the future, like this one does.
Larry Blustein does an excellent job. 560 WQAM, the 6 Ring Canes. Let people know, Blue, where they can find your next shows.
Yeah, well, we'll be on this coming right after the Miami Heat on Monday, which is Martin Luther King Day. So we're scheduled to be on from 7 to 9. Miami Heat play early, and then usually we're on, and I let everybody know, and our guest list is going to really, really get much, much better. We're going to have a lot of college coaches. We're going to hook up with Mario Cristobal, probably in the second week of February. Just let him get the second National Signing Day out of the way. We'll be able to, pick his brain, because by then those guys will be more than commits. They'll be signees, and he can talk about them. And there's a lot of kids, like, he can't talk about a Carmoni McLean right now because he's not signed. But, I'm sure that once he gets in the fold, he's got plenty to talk about. But yeah, it's a really good deal. We have 7 interviews every week. I mean, it's not, awesome. It's an interview driven show, and it gives people an opportunity to learn about not only the high school players, but some of the college coaches. And we tap into a lot of the analysts. Andrew Ivins joins us a lot. We're at FSU, we're at Florida, we're at UCF. Jason Beatty from the Orlando Sentinel joins us. We have a varied amount of Miami people, you're included, that we talk to each week and get their opinion on it. And I enjoy it.
It's a great show. Everyone should check it out. And guys, thank you for making Locked On Canes your first listen. Now, for your second listen, check out our brand new podcast on this network, Locked On College Basketball. Experts Isaac Shade and Andy Patton bring you everything you need to know on and off the court. Plus, hear from big-name experts, coaches, and players throughout the basketball landscape. Locked On College Basketball, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. So make sure you follow Larry Blustein on Twitter, at Larry Blustein. We will talk to you guys again next time on another episode of Locked On Canes, part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.